Hi there, Bonnie Kissinger with Get Healthier Coaching. This is a beginner's yoga video. We're going to cover 3 poses: mountain pose, chair pose, and tree pose. All 3 of these poses are foundational poses in yoga, and they're going to help you to build a nice, strong inner core. So we'll get started. Mountain pose is standing at the top of your mat. And my feet are active. They're about hip distance apart. Some people do tree pose like this, and I'm not a fan. I feel a little wobbly. So mountain pose can be done with your feet hip distance apart. And feet placement is kind of critical. Sometimes I tell people to draw Sharpie footprints wherever your feet go, because this is a place where throughout your yoga practice you're going to want to learn how to bring your feet back up to here, or maybe a little bit further back to give your hands room. The anatomy points on tree pose, because everybody's feet are built a little different, mine are really wide, is the middle of the ankle and the second toe. So you want those 2 lines right here to be parallel to each other. So my tree pose doesn't look like this because the outside of my feet are parallel because I have wide feet. So it's anatomically the center of the ankle and the second toe pointing forward. And while I don't keep my toes lifted all the time, they're not gripping. So we're going to go through a practice to learn what the 4 corners of your feet are. You hear this a lot in yoga classes and you're like, huh? So the 4 corners, if this is a foot, is here, 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 and here. And how we're going to find that is we're going to close our eyes and we're going to sway back and forth. So with your eyes kind of closed and your heart lifted and your belly lifting up, just sway to the side, and you'll find these points on the outsides of your feet where you kind of stop and they feel like poles. The heels are hard to find, but there are corners on your heels. Okay? And then you can find the balance point in the middle. So try that for a moment. Okay? And then we're going to sway forward to back. So you'll find the front points of your feet, the back, and then softly close the eyes, swaying back and forth, and find where your body balances. So try that for a moment. So hopefully you found this spot where you kind of feel nice and centered with your eyes closed. If it was hard to do it with your eyes closed, go ahead and try that same thing with your eyes open next time. So tree pose. I'm going to tell you all the points of tree pose. We're only going to cover this one once, so go back and revisit this every once in a while because you'll pick more up later as you develop more in your yoga practice. So my knees are slightly bent. My knees are never fully locked out. They're always slightly bent. And I'm kind of rolling my legs open a little bit, like if you had a Pez dispenser. That's a terrible analogy. But you're opening up here and lifting right here. Okay? So at that point you should feel your glutes working. And you're not letting your back sway back. You're keeping your belly lifted up like you're trying to put on those tight jeans, lifting your belly up. At this point, most of the pelvic floor should be working with this outer roll of the legs and the lifting up of the abs. You can think about the whole torso, bringing your ribs off your hips, and that might help you to engage your abs. So the heart is lifted right here, and if you've kind of lost your balance point, refine that. And so you can feel as if you're drawing a string all the way up, and your heart lifts, but also the back of your head kind of lifts up right here. It's not like this, your back will sway. Your back is naturally curved like an S, and we want to kind of draw it up evenly so it's still curved, but you're nice and tall. This is one of the reasons why people gain inches when they go through a yoga practice, because they learn how to lift themselves up. And this is important as we age. Our vertebral discs, and we get sloppy and lazy, crunch down on each other. The discs get smushed. And you lose inches because you're not holding your vertebrae up. We're like this all the time instead of lifting up, and we become taller. And you have less weight on these joints down here because you're actually lifting up with your muscular body versus settling down with your skeletal body. That's the awesome thing about yoga, is learning how to lift up, and you'll actually have less wear and tear on the joints down here because you're lifting up. So like when we're running and you want to lift through the pelvic floor and lift your core up, it's nicer on the hips because you're not slamming down on them. You're more like sort of floating, and then they can do this nice, better rhythm versus this dishwasher thing we do when we're running. So you can practice this on your yoga mat and go do it when you're running. So the shoulders might be up here, so you want to kind of relax them and then draw them back and down. The shoulder blades come on the back and down. And so this is a very active pose. You're doing a lot. Your feet are active. You're rolling your legs out. Your glutes are engaged. This comes up. Your ribs are coming up. Your heart is coming up. Your shoulders are relaxed and down. And then you're lifting up through the crown of the head, which is kind of up here. And you're lifting up while your hands are at your side. So this is a mountain pose. And if you practice this, and the intent would be to be able to hold this for forever, you should actually be walking around like this. If your back starts hurting, that just means that you need to go work on your back some more and use more of your core right here to lift up. So mountain pose. This is a returning pose. People return to this in a sloppy fashion. This pose needs to be done well, executed each time. So when they say, put your hands at your heart, like if you're reaching up and exhaling, hands down to the heart, this is an active motion. I'm really squeezing my hands together. I'm feeling the surface of my hands together. I'm pressing my elbows. They're nice and strong. My shoulder blades are still down and on my back. I'm not like this. So mountain pose with your hands at your heart. Be active. So when you lift up and exhaling down, this is what you should look like when you're waiting for the yoga teacher to do something next. You should be standing here, breathing, collecting yourself, asking yourself if your feet are lifted, your toes are lifted, what your legs are doing, if you're standing like that or like that or like that. Right here. At attention, ready to go. Okay, so that's mountain pose. Good for building up total kinetic awareness and core strength. So we're going to work on chair pose. Chair pose is Utkatasana in Sanskrit. Chair pose is a strength building, leg building. And we're going to try 3 different varieties. The first one, you can make your choice on if you want your legs together or separate a little bit. I like mine a little separate, but once we get into like kind of side chair and whatnot, it's not right or wrong either way. It's just different skills. So this is if your balance is a little less and you're a little wobbly, you widen the legs out a little bit. Putting the legs together is turning 2 legs into 1. So we're going to practice chair pose like this. So chair pose looks like this. Okay. And from the side, looks like this. Notice how my back isn't swayed. It's not like this, like that. Okay. So ideally, chair pose would be to where your arms are all up here. So where your arm would be parallel to your ear. However, with the triathletes and our tight swimming shoulders, getting our arms up to here might nag some fun stuff right here. So you want to try to get your arms by your ears. However, this isn't the place to stretch your shoulders, so if they're here, that's fine. Or you can practice cactus arms here. We're not trying to stretch the shoulders here, but this is a good test of how much range of motion you have in your shoulders. We'll stretch the shoulders later in a different video. Okay, so chair pose. Standing at the top of your mat, I want you to practice this with me. Chair pose like here, okay? And see how my knees are put together, my back is not swayed, I'm lifting my hands forward, my fingers are working strong, okay? And it doesn't matter how far down you go, your quads are getting good work. So this is an excellent pose for building leg strength, knee strength. And we'll come up. Okay, so shake the back a little bit. So that's just standard chair pose. I want to show you a nice exercise for anybody that has SI issues, meaning that the SI is maybe hypermobile on one side or the other or both, and it's moving and you get it stuck. Once you get the SI joint in, this is a pose to snug that whole area up, and what we'll do is we'll activate all of this right here to snug the area up to keep the SI joint in. And this pose is wonderful to do that if you do it right. It's hard to get right, so video yourself and send it to me. It doesn't matter how far your knees go. So here's what it looks like. Let's try this. This next chair pose is here. And for the beginning one, put your hands on your hips. What you're going to do is bend at the hip, and then when you come up, start it here, like that. What you will see is people going like this, and that's not it. We start activating here and bring the back up flat. So it's this motion. Okay? So it's an activation here with the back flat. So if you had SI issues, you could do that. It takes 5 times probably max to really snug that area up. And if you struggle with SI issues and you get into this area of it's fine, I would suggest doing that routinely, maybe once or twice a week to keep the area fine, because I find that people with SI issues, once you have an SI issue, you generally always have it, especially the ladies, because we did this all the time with the babies. Okay, so that is chair pose, and we'll do one more chair pose. And this is a twisting chair pose, good for ab work. So you're going to be here. We're in chair pose. We're holding it. Hands at your heart. And then we twist. So with your exhale, you twist right here, keeping the knees from moving apart and twisting like that. Back to center. And twisting the opposite way. Back to center, and lifting up, and down to the heart. So that is chair pose, and chair pose twisting. So when you see these in your yoga class or in the next videos, you'll have a little better idea of what's going on. The last pose that I wanted to talk about is tree pose. Tree pose is great for building strength. We're going to go through a whole video on tree pose itself because it's so wonderful, but this one's just kind of the beginning. So I usually, for some reason, do it in the middle of my mat. I'm not sure why. And so what I do is I plant my left foot, and so you'll see tree pose. You guys know what tree pose looks like. And my toes are not gripping. That's step number 1. Notice that I've put my foot on my calf to make it easier right now. So the hip bones are straight forward, and the knee is going out to the side. This gets the glute involved in that SI area as well. So if you are fine here, tree pose here, the hand's active, you could think about putting it up here. The number 1 thing to work through is not letting the hips twist around to get that knee that way, and to avoid the foot cramping. And you avoid the foot cramping by the toes not gripping. So those 4 corners that we talked about at the beginning in mountain pose, that's what I'm standing on. My knee is slightly bent. My leg is not a stick. It's a shock absorber. It's moving slightly. And I'm balancing on those 4 corners. And so my toes really aren't involved. So then the feet don't. Okay, so let's try it on the other side. The right foot plants, you snuggle in here, hips are forward, heart is forward and lifted. Okay, word of caution, there is a big no-no in the yoga world with the knees. We don't put our foot right by the knee. It's either north or south on the calf or clear up here. If you can't manage clear up here, go all the way down. So again, not gripping with the toes. Keep Open this knee open. And that's tree pose.